Awesome. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Thanks
Hi
so
there.
much for joining me. Hi, John. Hi, Scott. Really good to have you both here. Hello to everyone watching. This is going to be a really great session. We're talking about the energy transition, and I want to give a little bit of background. So I am one of the co-founding directors of Dukaru. We are a sales and marketing consultancy based in Aberdeen, and I started chatting quite a lot to Scott and John over on Clubhouse, and they run a room on the energy transition. And so, yeah, they've got a lot of kind of knowledge, and they've started quite a few really interesting conversations. So I wanted to get them on here so that they can share some of what they've been talking about. So I'll let John introduce himself first, and then we'll go over to Scott, and then we'll get going.
Okay, lovely. So, hi everybody. My name is John Butler. I guess my background really comes from sort of the maritime and offshore industry. Many moons ago, I was in the Merchant Navy, and then sort of towards the end of the 90s, I started studying in Robert Gordon University here in Aberdeen, and then started really in the upstream oil and gas energy industry. So I worked with companies like Technip, FMC, and worked in the engineering, procurement, and commissioning side of things, working with subsea contracts in the North Sea, and then briefly moved back to Ireland, where I worked at Jacobs Engineering and worked with the Port Authority in Dublin and on their main contract there, before coming back again to the oil and gas industry, working with a small company called MCS, which got acquired by a big company that everybody in Aberdeen knows called Wood Group. And I guess I spent the majority of 12 years up to just the beginning of the first month of 2020 working with Wood. And towards the last couple of, I guess, the last 6 to 12 months that I was at Wood, so really in 2019, there was more of a focus and increase on energy transition. And when the term I really kind of started to hear it being used. And I've often spoken to Scott about this as well. It's like, for me, one of the watershed moments was Oil and Gas UK did a 2-day conference on energy transition. And I think it was in May of 2019. And it was the first time that I was ever at an Oil and Gas UK conference where we didn't talk about wrench time, we didn't talk about drilling, we didn't talk about production, production efficiency. What we talked about was net zero, climate crisis, ethical investment, and then technologies like CCUS, geothermal, hydrogen, offshore renewables. And it was very interesting. For me, that seemed like a real game changer. The fact that there was a difference happening in the industry, and the predominant petroleum industry in the UK was kind of focused on it. And so I guess as we moved into 2020, we knew that we had our net zero targets coming out in the next sort of 10 years. And for me, you see a natural sort of pivot, for one of our terms. It's a bit of an overused phrase, but if you look at you're going to be transitioning really in that respect. And I took it as the opportunity after leaving Wood to really try to unpick what that meant. And that led me into sort of the last, I guess, 18 months, where I've worked on hydrogen projects, I've worked with renewable contractors, worked with technology companies in that space, and really kind of developed out and built out my hydrogen experience and understanding, and also how it affects the existing energy ecosystem, as we kind of termed it. So the way I look at it now is that the oil and gas industry in the UK CS was dominated by oil and gas. Going forward, that's not going to be the case. It's going to be a hybrid, a combination of renewables and oil and gas as well. And that's really kind of the starting point of energy transition. And for me, that's what I find is most exciting about it. And what I really enjoy about the idea of of Aberdeen and the northeast of Scotland and the UK, really pioneering this, is the fact that it's got a supply chain and a great skill set and a great skill base to be able to build on that and transition. And it's up to companies and operators and developers to kind of drive that. But again, as individuals as well, and that's why I think where a lot of stuff Scott are doing, even with Clubhouse, is about discussing, having the conversations, educating, not having all the answers. It's not about having all the answers at all. And sometimes it's about asking the questions that we don't know the answers to, but having people on things like Clubhouse and on platforms like this who do have the answers, but gives them a platform to speak on, So, and then I guess most recently now, for myself, from next week, I'll be going back into a staff role, and that will be with Global Maritime. And I'm actually going to be sort of the global lead for energy transition for them. And for me, that's a great opportunity because it's a global-based company that's involved very much in the marine sector, not only in energy but in shipping, aquaculture, and renewables, and allows me to really sort of engage through them the energy transition and how it can affect different businesses in different sectors. So for me, that's a great opportunity. So I've talked a lot there. Hopefully, that gives you something to go with.
Thank you so much, John. There's a few things we'll come back to. There might be people watching this thinking, what is Clubhouse? So we'll explain what Clubhouse is. And then your wealth of knowledge around hydrogen as well. And I know net zero 2050 is being kicked around a lot, but be good to go into exactly what is that? What is the target that the government is setting, and how does Scotland fit into that? That'll be something good to touch on a little bit later on. But in the meantime, I'm going to go over to Scott. Please introduce yourself. Tell us a bit more.
Hey, Kemi. Thanks very much for inviting me up here as well. And it's great to be in a room with you and John. I think over the last little while, we've developed quite a good friendship and bond when we've been talking about these things. And Clubhouse has been a great place to bring like-minded people together. So a little bit about me. I started off in the oil and gas business in 1990. I was a process equipment manufacturing engineer, fitter essentially, and served my time. After about 4 years, I decided that, well, mechanical fitting was maybe not for me. Went back to school, retrained, did petroleum geology, studied petroleum geology at Aberdeen, and graduated in '99 when oil was at $3 a barrel. So I've spent the last 20 odd years now working in the upstream oil and gas part of the industry, and primarily focused on the drilling business. And that's taken me on an amazing journey where I've been able to travel internationally, work in almost every continent, in every corner of the world, primarily in the search for oil and gas. However, in the last sort of 5 years, some of the technologies that I've been working with have been focused on helping geothermal drilling. And they primarily to try and reduce the cost of drilling geothermal wells, because it's not the same equation. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've taken out of the energy transition is, as we transition our skill set that we have at the moment in upstream oil and gas towards renewable energy, it isn't going to be exactly the same. Upstream oil and gas isn't going to disappear. It's still going to be there for the next 50 years. But I think I share an affinity with John here when we're looking at overall, we want to ensure that people understand the truth. And there's a lot of things being bandied around out there that are the opinion of the person or their rhetoric. And we want to use our platforms to try and take that away, to try and give some people a sense of calmness and security about what's going to happen in the energy transition. One of the biggest things for me in the room has been, we had a lot of people come into the room that are maybe in the situation where they've either been made redundant or they're looking at a career change. And they want to understand, is that, do I now have to retrain immediately? Is my skill set going to be valuable? Where's it going to fit into that? And the amount of people that are fearful of the energy transition is quite large still. So hopefully, by dispelling the myth, cutting through to what's actually happening out there and trying to disseminate as much knowledge as possible, we can take away some of that fear. Also, I learned an awful lot about electric vehicles. It's been great, and hydrogen. I mean, I knew nothing about hydrogen before, but coming back into this sphere and understanding that, okay, now I'm a geothermal drilling engineer. What do I need to know about CCS? What do I need to know about CCUS? And personally, it's been a really good journey for me, and it's helped me as well to focus on my key calling, which is to help companies to make that transition from that traditional oil and gas towards the energy transition and understand where they fit into renewable energy. And perhaps as they go on, maybe other industries too. There's a lot of really good skill sets. I think John mentioned earlier on about Aberdeen and the Northeast. There's a tremendous amount of skilled people at the moment, which could be put into developing and accelerating our mode towards the energy transition. Because I think that's one thing that seems to be talked about a lot at the moment, is the IEA came out with a report recently, which is saying that by 2050, we have to get here, and we are nowhere near it right now. So everybody now is talking about accelerating it. It's talking about getting people out of the way and processes out of the way so we can accelerate the energy transition and bring that along. And another phrase that people hear often is a just transition, and we've been talking about that a lot in the room too. And I think that a just transition doesn't just mean a just transition for the people that are in the business at the moment. It means globally as well. So there's a lot of good global questions, and Clubhouse has that reach as well. Yeah, I think that's where I am at the moment, Yukemi.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Scott. I think a couple of people are saying, just for testing of sound, the person that can't hear, let me know if you can hear now. Other people saying they can hear. So maybe just check what's maybe happened. It might be your bandwidth or something. So what I wanted to do first is people who are wondering what is Clubhouse. So Clubhouse is a newish social media app. It's audio only. And it just allows people to get into a room virtually and have a good discussion. I think that's the best way of describing it. And there are different topics being discussed right across the board. You have different clubs by interest, by geography, so different opportunities to mix. And so what's happened over the last 3 to 4 months is we've developed a club called Business Scotland. And at the moment, we have just over 700 members within that, and John and Scott are a part of that. And under that club, we run a energy transition room. So it's every Tuesday at 12 p.m. British Standard Time. So this is led by Scott, John, and Dorothy, Claire, and Mark as well, actually. So a few people kind of driving that forward, and it's been absolutely fantastic. And there've been so many interesting discussions coming up. So when you hear John or Scott referring to Clubhouse or room, that is what they mean. It's basically the conversations that we're having on this particular app. So first things first, I mean, what you were saying, Scott, resonated with me around myths that are out there, things that people believe that might not be exactly true. I recently did a poll online. I created a poll on LinkedIn around electric vehicles, and that was interesting to see. 345 or so people voted. And about 56 people felt that we're not there yet with electric vehicles, for instance, that, basically said, ask me in 5 years, was the response. And around 18% of people already had an electric vehicle. But there were quite a few people in the thread who just felt that electric vehicles were not actually sustainable. They were not environmentally friendly. There was some reference to hydrogen-powered vehicles being a far better option. And some people felt that driving their current diesel car was actually, driving it into the ground basically was, a better option than maybe, selling that or scrapping that and buying an electric vehicle. So different schools of thought, and a lot of it made sense. I think it came down to the infrastructure, and I agreed with that, the infrastructure around charging these vehicles and so on. So I'm learning as well, and I'm always fascinated by the discussions coming up. I do think that we all need to pull together and take it seriously. So I think the first question I wanted to ask, and I'll pose it to John first and then you, Scott, is when we say net zero, what are we talking about? Is this a UK-wide initiative? Is it global? Is it Scotland? And what's driven that target? And where are we with that, John?
Okay, so I guess in a nutshell, it's net zero is a global aspect, but it's world governments that are taking on different areas. So you have different targets that are being reached at different times by different countries in different areas. Net zero is really getting to a point where we're not sort of emitting any more CO2 than we're actually creating. So we're balancing things out. So we're not having a gulf of CO2 going into the atmosphere. Because if you look at a lot of the timelines, particularly over the last 20, 30 years, the amount of CO2 that's been emitted has sort of gone up exponentially as sort of large economies have really built out, in parts of the world. And so a lot of what we're trying to do with net zero is in different countries and different areas, make targets that make our net zero commitments realistic for the area. Now, I don't know the exact numbers. Scott might know better than that, but I know that Scotland have got very aggressive targets that they're looking to reach in comparison to others. I think one of the largest economies that was, sort of most recently this year came out was China. I think they're looking at net zero by 2060. So 10 years on, but it's a far bigger, sort of country, a far bigger economy. So it's about looking at where the how you manage these things now, and the end goal is basically about the degrees and increase in global warming. So the first target is like your 1.5 sort of degree increase in temperature. That's what we're trying to abate, minimize, or avoid. If that can't be avoided, and different environmental scientists say that it's going to happen sooner than we're thinking, and but what we're trying to do is try to minimize or reduce the acceleration of the increase in global temperatures. So in loose terms, they're looking at 1.5, 2 degrees, 2.5. The higher the temperature gets, the greater the catastrophe potential for the environment. So again, things like, it seems like a lifetime ago, right at the beginning of prior to the pandemic, there's bushfires in Australia that pretty much raged for sort of best part of 2 months. And you can see Sydney and the bushfires, sort of approaching the main metropolis, and then you have California bushfires, and again we're getting the bushfire season now. And what people are finding, and from a global environment and weather perspective, these things are happening. They're accelerating a lot more. There's a lot more of them happening in a lot more succession. And these are the things that are being, being perpetrated by the increase in temperature. So the greater the increase, the greater the propensity for these extreme environmental effects and climate catastrophes. So that's kind of why we're trying to achieve it. That's kind of net zero, and why we're trying to sort of minimize the amount of carbon emissions in order to reduce the temperature as much as possible to avoid these potential climate issue disasters. Roughly there.
Thank you for that, John. Scott, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think that John pretty much hit the nail on the head with respect to how we do that. And climate scientists have identified, and it's proven that the CO2 emissions are one of the biggest cause of what we're going through at the moment. So it is the biggest thing that we're focused on at the moment. I think at the moment, I saw something in some statistics yesterday that China emits around about 13 trillion tons of carbon a year, and the G7 countries, they emit around 13 trillion tons a year. So that's 26 trillion tons at the moment that is going into the atmosphere. Just from G7 and China, that's without looking at other nations. And the rate at which it's increasing, we're still increasing that. It's not going down yet. So as we go through that, there's a lot of initiatives ongoing at the moment to try and look at how we address that with respect to carbon pricing. Now, it's difficult to explain it all here in this room, but what I'm going to do is give you a little bit of a summary. So if you emit carbon dioxide, then you're charged a tariff from the government. The volume of carbon dioxide you emit, you're charged a tariff, and that carbon pricing is set by the government. So at the moment in Europe, it's around about 50 euros a ton. I think it's about 50 pounds a ton in the UK. So by having that price for goods that are produced by emitting carbon, it will naturally increase the price of those goods, and inevitably people will stop buying them. Yeah. There are goods out there and commodities that you just can't get away from. Things like steel and aluminium that are the cause of the cause of carbon emissions as well. However, there is still a big focus within steel making. I think yesterday I saw that there's some processes that are being put in place to create iron carbonlessly, and I know that I was listening to a decarbonisation theme this morning as well, where aluminium as well, bauxite, is being produced carbonlessly. But it does, when you look at all of that, it can be being produced carbonlessly in one location, but in another location it could be being produced cheaply with a high carbon output. And that material over time, if carbon pricing increases, will gradually be priced out the market, whilst the lower carbon stuff will gradually come in the market. So I hope that explains a little bit about how carbon pricing is out there to try and be a driver towards getting to that net zero. And when we're at that net zero, we're not producing any more than we're using. Yeah, there you go. I hope that helped a little bit to try.
It's a good point though, Scott, as well. I remember one of the things I heard about and I thought was a very interesting aspect is talk about externalities. So basically, rather than talking about things just basically in the value you get or almost like, the GDP terms, you talk about it in the respect of what are the social, environmental, sort of consequences of that thing. So if you look at, for example, like you say, like, whether it be, the term is kind of green steel or green aluminium. So basically, if you buy aluminium at, I don't know, making up numbers, at $1,000 a ton, I'm sure it's much more or less than that, and it has a zero carbon, sort of intensity to it. But you can get another aluminium at $500 a ton, half the price. So you can get a lot more profit for what you want, but basically it's a very carbon intensive process. Now, if you look at the whole externalities of that, what you're going to sort of say is that, well, I'm going to pay more because the social and environmental consequences of that is going to be paid back to me. Now, maybe that's in a financial term, or maybe that's in, sort of on the merits of, sort of your ESGs associated with your business or your company. And I think that's a way we need to start looking at things as well. And it's a part about understanding where the externalities of sort of different product usage and procurement comes from, and then what the realities of those sort of products are based on their carbon or their emissions associated with them.
Yeah, I agree with that completely, John. The other part of that as well is that it needs to be a just transition, right? We can't just enforce these high carbon prices straight away and shut down people producing high carbon costs, because we're just going to push people into poverty. We're going to increase poverty, and we need to do it carefully, slowly, and at different paces in different parts of the world as well. I know I'm sitting very nicely in my comfortable seat outside of our booth here, but there's somebody in India right now who's going, I can't live without oil and gas. And BP and Aramco are still going to be building new refineries in India, in the developed world, in the next 5 years. So the targets for net zero are going to be different in different countries, and it is going to be implemented differently in different countries. But I think there has to be a degree of environmental leadership by those that can. So yeah, that's where I am with that at the moment.
You hit on something I was thinking, Scott, around that balance, right? So, when you talk about the carbon, I can see that promoting the right behaviors will require this. Promoting the reduction in carbon emissions means that we have to make it basically, uncomfortable to keep producing things with high carbon. But at the same time, there are people who can't make that transition very quickly. There are certain products in the marketplace that heavily depend on this. So I think you hit the nail on the head, is that transition. How do we make sure that we're carrying people along, not frustrating them, but actually pulling them along so that they understand and they can feel like they're contributing to this transition. We've got a question from a lady called Maggie. Anna, can't see her name on the screen, but I know it's Maggie, and I think she knows you, John. So she's got a great point. She says, yes, oil and gas will be around for the next 50 years. However, my biggest concern is maintaining the oil price. 70% of the barrel worldwide is transport fuel, and demand for that will chronically and progressively decline in the future. We have to keep the oil price up to support the energy transition. How? Global oil collision? Any thoughts?
Yeah, great question, Maggie. And yeah, I do know Maggie well, and it's a caller in from Canada as well. So it's a long distance call as well. So thanks for that question. Yeah, I think 70% of the barrel is transportation fuel, and a lot of that is sort of being taken out for other uses, and sort of there's less sort of fuels or diesels or petrols for transportation and mobility. It has the potential to have an impact on the oil price. I think there's also an aspect here though where we sort of you're seeing a lot of oil and gas companies are transitioning at the moment as well, and there's two sides to that coin. First of all, you've got the companies who are looking to make sure they're having a larger, offshore and onshore renewable sort of portfolio, which allows them for that whole electrification or alternative energy, including hydrogen or alternative fuels. So that's helping them change their business in order to meet the changing environment for mobility, let's say. So like we said, oil will continue to be required for decades to come. its uses I'm guessing is going to reduce, because there's going to be more competition for different types of energy vectors for different types of uses that's currently oil or gas is currently used for at the moment. But it's the opportunity for the oil and gas companies to kind of pivot and transition to other areas that allows them to develop things. And ultimately, where's the last drop of oil going to come from? Probably places where it's cheapest right now to produce oil. So if you imagine, like, mature basins, or where it's traditionally a higher cost to extract anyway compared to other places globally, are going to be the first to, let's say, be mothballed or to complete that transition. Whereas sort of the latter end is going to be countries where it's far easier to extract that oil and it's a far lower cost. So I'm not sure if I answered the question. Always great questions from Maggie. Scott, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So for me, the OPEC is at the moment got their hands on the tap, right? I think we're all firmly aware that as we're going to go through a little bit of an adjustment where they're going to open the tap, increase production as the prices come up here, and they will be controlling the price of oil probably for the next 10 years. As we go through the transition, though, I think there was something that was brought up in the room a little while ago, and it was a term that I hadn't seen used before, which was fee versus dividend. And when you look at fee versus dividend, it's a way of weaning people off of oil, right? It's generally the price will go up the price of oil will gradually go up until it becomes more expensive than the renewable energy that's going to take it over its place. And everybody that's vested in oil and gas they'll be part of that as well, right? So the shareholders in the oil and gas companies, they'll understand that that's where oil and gas is going to go. As we invest, we'll get dividends on higher oil prices to the point where it's no longer used, and we go over towards more renewable energy. But again, for me, the biggest crux of all of this is also the change of materials, right? At the moment, we don't just use oil and gas for burning, for fuel. We do also use it for plastics, pharmaceuticals. There's a lot of other uses that the later oil that's going to be produced is going to have to be around for that until we have alternatives for that too. And right now, where our focus being so much on energy, we've got less focus on looking at alternatives for pharmaceuticals and plastic materials as well. So yeah, that all has to be addressed.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Great question, Maggie. And if you're listening now or later and you've got a question, put it in the comments and we would absolutely like to respond to that. So if we go back to the Clubhouse rooms that have been running, is it week 5 or week 6, guys, with that so far?
I think it's week 6. Yeah, I think it's week 6.
Yeah, amazing. So I know last one you had Cameron McNatt of Motion Energy, and he was speaking about the Blue X technology, wind energy. So I know you've had a few really interesting conversations with people over the last 6 weeks. So it would be good maybe go to you first, Scott. What have been, I guess, some of the things that have come out? We talked about myths before, like things people believe that maybe are not necessarily accurate and so on. And what's really come out in some of those conversations where you thought, this is a really good opportunity to just give people a little bit more knowledge around this and to shine a light on what the case actually is. Do you have any moments that come into your mind, Scott, when you think about the last 6 weeks in those rooms?
Yeah, we had a room about 3 weeks ago. And so just to describe what's happening in Clubhouse Europe, we're essentially a moderator for the room. And what we do is we usually pick 3 topics that we'll talk about during the room, but you'll probably find that by about 5 past the hour, we've squished off on a tangent and we've gone down the rabbit hole of something that somebody's talked about, which is great. And as moderators, we're really just there to try and guide the conversation along. And hopefully we get into that situation where the room just takes over itself. You get people that are in there that are extremely knowledgeable about their subjects, and they start telling people and educating people, and people ask more questions, and we just sit back, and those rooms are great. But one of the what happened about 3 weeks ago was we had a gentleman who was involved in the energy industry in India, and he was also part of Scottish Development International. Uzair, I think his name was, or Umair. And he came into the room and he lit the place up talking about renewable energy in India. And none of us had any idea of what was going on over there, what kind of scale it was going to happen in, what kind of time frame they're looking at. And I think we've talked about that whole, okay, yeah, we're going to have an understanding of how the rest of the world's going to catch up, but you have no idea how quickly they want to. There is such a will out there, and I learned so much about the wind energy that's going on in India at the moment, which I had no idea about, and how, again, with those skill sets that we're in here in Scotland, leading, and I'm cutting edge some of the technology here, and how that's being developed and pushed forward.
Scott, your Wi-Fi is a little shaky. Is it shaky for you as well, John?
Yeah, just
yeah, you're cutting in and out a little bit.
Yeah.
Scott. But yeah, if you go ahead, John, and maybe give Scott a chance to.
Where Scott was coming from is the fact that, you know, what Clubhouse allowed in that environment was to start off a conversation where we're talking about, you know, sort of different types of energy transition, and then it turned into a conversation about what's happening in India, and then it gives you an understanding that sort of say, wow, like, you know, you see a lot more that's happening in the area, and you understand from a you know, boots on the ground level, and then I think in the same conversation we had somebody else who was up on stage. And like I say, where Scott was talking about, sometimes the best clubhouses are the ones that kind of almost manage themselves. Okay. And these two guys who'd never met each other started interacting. So saying, oh, like, I've got an idea looking at this types of technology. And the other guy's going, well, I'm interested in those areas. And suddenly what you're doing then is you're organically creating this network that of two people meeting each other who've never come across each other before, and never would have likely to have met. And then it creates that relationship and builds out that network.
Yeah.
And for me, I think that's a lot of the power of Clubhouse. And one of the things I remember I was chatting to Scott about before as well. A few weeks ago, I was talking to a friend of mine back in Ireland, and I explained to him what Clubhouse was. And somehow at the same time, we started talking about podcasts. And he said an interesting thing to me. He said, I don't listen so much to podcasts anymore, because sometimes what happens with the podcast, you're just getting the narrative of the individual, and then so what happens is you kind of, you know, you listen to what they're saying, and then what you repeat whatever you hear. And I kind of went, he's very good. I've done that, you know, and I see what you're saying, and it makes you think about that. Now the interesting thing about Clubhouse is it's almost like a live podcast. So like Scott was saying, you can start off and you might have a narrative or maybe a thought or a decision or an idea that you've come up with. But then somebody else will come into the room and will either counter that or give you an alternative view or challenge something, or maybe just take you off in a totally different direction. And that's what I like about it. It's like almost an organic podcast, which, you know, sort of as moderators, you just kind of, you manage to make sure everybody's playing nicely and everybody's being respectful and all that kind of stuff. But really, like, you know, you allow the room to go where it wants to go, and keep it in context of the you know, sort of boundaries of the topic, you know, and broadly that would be kind of energy transition in that respect.
Thanks so much for that, John. I don't know if you're back. It still seems frozen though. I'll just answer a quick question. We've got someone asking in the chat if you have to be in Scotland to join the Scottish Clubhouse. No, you don't, not at all. I will send you a link to join the club, which brings me nicely to kind of the final thing I wanted to touch on, which is, you know, the future, really. So just to give everyone a heads up, this is the last room I'm going to hold until probably August time. I'm just taking a break from the LinkedIn Live space. But we've got a summit planned on Clubhouse at the end of August. And one of the rooms within that summit is going to be on the energy transition. So I spoke to Scott about it. John, I don't know if I've actually mentioned it to you. You may have been in the room when I said it before. But if anyone's interested in being part of that, you know, having this kind of conversation is quite organic. Please, by all means, get in touch with me or message Scott or John if the energy transition is something that you wanna get involved with. But I wanted to come to maybe go to Scott to give you a chance if your Wi-Fi is back on to talk about.
I can hear you.
All right, fantastic. So to talk a little bit about the future, what people can expect from your energy transition rooms, what are some of the topics that you're looking to cover based on the feedback and organic conversations that have been happening over the past 6 weeks? You know, are you still running rooms over the summer? Are you taking a break? Is it a different format? And what topics and themes are going to be coming out over the next wee while?
We haven't really discussed a summer break yet. I think we'll just keep on ploughing through for the people that are still at home and working away. We'll maybe keep some of our guest presenters for later in the year, and we'll see how that goes. At the moment, we've had two types of rooms. We've had the room where we've had a guest moderator come in, and they've been really valuable because it's allowed them to share their story. And I know we got some great feedback from Cameron about Clubhouse. He'd never been on it before and got a lot out of it. You know what it's like I'm the same. If you're presenting all the time and you've got a slide deck, you're showing your slide deck all the time. A drop-in audio platform is not that. You have to be able to communicate and tell people about what you're doing, just as if you're talking to and describing it to a child, so they can understand it and visualize it themselves, and at least give them enough information to be able to go and do their own research afterwards. The kinds of things that we're looking at on a weekly basis is we really just decide the topics that we're going to discuss on the week. We try and keep them as current as possible. And as you know, Yukemi, there's a lot of preparation that goes into these rooms. We spend quite a bit of time researching the topics of the week, looking at the material that's coming through. We share an awful lot. We have a little LinkedIn group that we have in our moderators, and we share different topics between us. And then on Thursday, I'll give everybody the nod to what are the top 3 that we want to talk about, and we'll choose that then. And I think one of the big things for me that happened was we opened the room up. It was originally just Business Scotland, but we opened it up globally, and it's meant that we've had people coming in, people like Bill Birch, who's in the hydrogen industry in Houston, Umair from India, and we get that flavor of people to come in, and if they want to come up on stage, they're very welcome. It is a very informal room. It's lunchtime. We want people to come up and feel like they can ask any question over the hour. So yeah, we'll keep it as fluid as we can. I know that there are a few other guest presenters that we're talking about at the moment, but they're not quite finalized yet. But we want to try and bring people from that renewable energy industry to come up and talk about their experiences, so that people, again, we just want to dispel the myths about the renewable energy technology and what they are. So yeah, that's our plan.
Fantastic. I've just put a link in the chat for anyone asking to the Business Scotland club. So even if you're not on Clubhouse, if you tap on that, you can get in through the club, basically, and it's on Android as well as iOS. So yeah, if you're interested, just feel free. If you want to ask us any questions, feel free to get in touch with myself, John, and Scott. John, I wondered if you had anything else to share around, I suppose, your vision going forward, so that yeah, we get to know.
Yeah, I think what really enthuses me about it is that energy transition is an exciting, part of the industry, and it's an exciting moment that we're in the energy industry itself. And we look at what's happening in the next 6 months. You've got COP26 coming up in Glasgow. You see announcements like even locally here in Aberdeen with this hydrogen hub that Aberdeen City Council are looking at developing. You look at sort of what's happening nationally, and ScotWind is about to come out with all these offshore wind licensing rounds. So there's so much topics. Half the time the trouble is with Clubhouse is trying to figure out how to schedule it and how to discuss it through. It's a very fertile area at the moment, and what I'd encourage is people to get involved. And ours is just one aspect, and we like to think that we do the best we can within it, but sort of find out as much as you can through, you're more than welcome in our Clubhouse, but also look at other avenues as well. Contact Scott, myself, whoever separately if you want as well. And ask questions, because I think one thing about Clubhouse, so I think a lot of the time if you're involved in that as a moderator, it, like Scott says, it takes an amount of work. And that's from sort of people who are naturally generous with their time, and one thing that in times of this, mentoring comes into a lot of things, and it's about sometimes what we're trying to do is where we can, based on what knowledge we have, is provide some sort of guidance and understanding and knowledge. And if that helps somebody and helps mentor them a little bit or understand a little bit about what the conundrum is for sort of energy transition, or how they can navigate their career to help it, then great, and we're here to try and help. We don't have all the answers. We might have some of the answers. If you're lucky, you might get an answer. But come along, and we'll always happily take the questions. Simple as that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, John. Thank you, Scott. I think what I love about what you're doing with the Energy Transition Room is how topical it is and how every week you have a discussion together around what you're going to bring to that room, what topics. You share news with each other, what's going on in the press, what's happening not just in Scotland and in the UK, but around the world. And so when you come to that room, you're getting it hot. Do you know what I mean? You're getting what's being talked about around the world right now. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. Thanks. I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for joining me. That's been epic. We've had a lot of people engaging and watching us today. And you'll find people will watch afterwards as well. They will think we're live, but yeah, don't tell them that we're not. This is it's a replay. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll be back in August, I promise. I just need a little bit of a rest. If there's anyone that you want me to interview on LinkedIn Live, or there's a topic that you would like me to cover, I'm more than happy to. Just send me a message through LinkedIn and share with me. There's someone you think that we should absolutely be listening to on here. Just let me know. I'm here to basically share and feed my audience. So thanks so much, Scott. Thank you, John. And bye, everyone. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Kimmy.
Thank you.
See you later.